And microphone on. There, I think everything is ready. Gotta love when kids wait until the very last minute to tell you they need something. Okay, but that's ready, that's ready, that's ready. I think we are good to go. And so, I think it is time to get started. So let's make that go away. Okay, hello! Shadowcat back, and today we're back on the subject of evil, but we're going to be doing it a little bit differently this time. We have talked extensively in the past about the concept of an objective evil. And I have covered it in terms of how it can be measured objectively and what and why that is. And we talked about how there are certain things which have been deemed either good or evil simply based upon humanity's need to survive through history, where tenets such as, just temperance went a long way into making sure that you had supplies through the cold winter. Because obviously, if you were going to be a glutton and eat all of your food in the summer, then you're going to starve to death in the winter. How things like, a good work ethic help you get the food for the winter, and those who are lazy and slothful will not have it. And so we discussed at length how evil can be objectified and how that applies to society as a whole. However, I talked mostly in generalities about what the concepts were and how they would affect society at large. Today, I want to do something a little bit more laser focused because I want to cover what it looks like using people as examples. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, that's easy. Just grab Hitler. Hitler was pretty evil, and you're right, Hitler was very evil. Good on you. Takes a true towering intellect to make that determination, but I'm glad that you got there. No, I'm going to be talking about a lot of other people, actually. And sometimes they're going to be individual people, sometimes they're going to be organizations, sometimes they will be governments. But either way, I'm going to be pointing at individual cases where we can actually point to them and say, what you're doing is wrong, what you're doing is evil. And so, before we get into the actual examples, I think it's important that we talk about that particular note right there. And this is something that I've discussed before, but we're going to revisit it anyway, just because it is important foundation if we're going to do this. And that is going to be Hanlon's razor. Now, this is something that I've talked about before, and I love Hanlon's razor. I really do. Because it comes into use in so many instances. Especially, since I mentioned earlier, kids. I love Hanlon's razor when it comes to kids. I know, mentioning kids and razors is generally usually a bad thing. However, Hanlon's razor is very short, very sweet. It says, never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. Which is great, and I wish that we could use it more often in life, because people make mistakes. People all over make mistakes. People of all ages make mistakes. And if we start attributing malice to every single time somebody does something that hurts us, we're going to be on the short track to the gallows real fast. It's always better to assume that somebody never intended to do something bad until we can prove otherwise. Now, you may also recognize that as being kinda the very basis for the idea of being innocent until proven guilty. This, along with Blackstone's formulation, which said that, 10 guilty persons should go free rather than one person be imprisoned. And you can extend that as much as you want. There's other people in history who've gone 100 people, 1,000 people, whatever. The idea being that we do not punish the innocent, and it would be better if the guilty went unpunished than the innocent went punished. All of these things come together, and in basically the same vein. That's a poor choice of words. I'm talking about veins and razors. I'm sorry, that was not intentional. But you get the idea. The idea that we don't automatically assume that people have done something out of a malicious evil towards us, or towards society at large, just because what they have done does not help either us or society, and sometimes it even hurts us. I see that JP is in the chat. Hello, JP. It's good to see you here. For a while there, I thought I was going to be doing this one all by myself. But you know what? That's the kind of commitment that I have when I do this. I will preach to absolutely no one, knowing that I am doing my best. So, today we're going to be talking about Hanlon's razor, and we're going to be inverting it. Because Hanlon's razor says never attribute to malice that which can be, or that which is adequately explained by stupidity. If we change just a few words in there, we can actually reverse the entire statement. For example, if we were to simply strike the word never, okay? Strike it. And I don't have a way to like put a strike over this, so I can't do that. If I were to put this in paint, I could do that. But if we strike the word never, and we give the prefix in to make this inadequately, we could say attribute to malice that which is inadequately explained by stupidity. Suddenly, we have taken something to say, if you cannot prove that this was ignorance, if you cannot prove that there was no ill will here, then we're going to have to attribute it to malice. And while that might be a little bit on the harsh side, because now we're getting back into the realm of proving your innocence rather than proving your guilt, what I intend to talk about today is the fact that if we take Hanlon's razor at its face and we attempt to explain by stupidity and we find ourselves falling short, if we cannot adequately explain something by stupidity, then we must attribute to malice. Because that is kind of the second part of this razor that people do not like to think about. They read this, or they recite the statement, from memory, and they stop there. And they neglect the part that if you cannot adequately explain by stupidity, you have to go back to point one. And so here we are. And as such, I have a lot of stories from this last week that are going to do a really good job of proving this point. And we're going to get into what it looks like, why we can call this an overt act of evil. And then, maybe, if we're lucky, we'll be able to get into actually doing something about it. But, I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Or possibly burn it. So the first thing I want to start off with today is this one from the Daily Mail. This came out on, where's the date? November 28th. So 4 days ago, 5 days ago, 4 days ago. Biden tells 813,000 more Americans he has wiped out their student loan debt. He has now forgiven $127 billion for 3.5 million borrowers, even though the Supreme Court sank his first bid. Now, why are we talking about this? If you come to my lectures on a regular basis, you may recall that a while back, I actually broke down and detailed how the current U.S. administration has actually violated every single article in the Bill of Rights. 1 through 10, straight down the board. I have shown how they have violated the constitutional rights to expression. I have shown how they have violated the constitutional rights to quartering, to search and seizure, to representation, to even states' rights. Every single one of them. And I stopped at the first 10. I probably could have kept going with the rest of them. And this falls in that line. Now, it's no secret that the Biden administration came out a long time ago and said that he wanted to forgive a whole bunch of college and university debt, which is actually a big problem. The very fact that there was $127 billion to forgive in the first place is a problem. Where's my phone at? Where's my phone? Here we go. Let me do some mathing here. Where's my calculator? 127 billion, so that's going to be 9 zeros. Divided by 3.5 million, that's going to be 3, 5, and then 5 zeros. Yep. That comes out to approximately $36,285 and a long decimal point afterwards and change. Now, obviously that is not going to be equally distributed across all of them, but still, let's just call it a... what was it again? We'll round down. We'll call it $36,000 in debt for each one of the students. For school. That is a lot. That is like an entire year's salary for somebody with a, pretty low wage job, actually. School should probably not be that expensive. Okay, I'll come right out and say that. School should probably not be that expensive. Especially for what having a college degree gets you nowadays, which is, in general, not a lot. And especially when you take into consideration some of the education that the students are getting in there. Most of the students that are going into college or university become doctors or lawyers or engineers, things that actually do require a fair amount of extra education. Yeah. We can have that talk. However, most of your degrees which involve anything in the arts or anything that involves, say, business, unless we're talking like accounting might need some extra education, but in general, if you want to run a business someday, the best advice is to just go do it. You don't need a degree to run a business. You don't. You really don't. All you need is a little bit of capital up front and a plan. And college is not involved in any of that. That's talking with either banks or investors. College has been abused. University has been abused because many people who go there did not need to go there. However, it is an extremely lucrative marketing ploy because we've been telling people for generations now that you must go to college, that anyone who doesn't go to college is never going to make it in life. And if you tell everybody they need something, that means that you can easily jack up the price of it, which is what they've done. And that has led to the debt crisis that we are in right now when it comes to college and university debt. That does mean that it needs to be fixed. That does not mean, however, this is the way to fix it. And how do we know this? Well, we know this because the first time this came up, it was announced that the Biden administration would be forgiving basically all student loans. And it was not well received. It was well received by the people who had student loans, of course. However, and this reminder has to come in very often, we must remember that the government doesn't actually have money. No government has money. Government has taxes. And taxes are your money. So anything that the government is spending comes from you. You are the one paying for it. And so the general populace, at least those who have any kind of basic understanding of how economics works, were very much anti this. And many places actually sued to stop him. And it went up the chain rather quickly until the Supreme Court actually told him that the presidential administration, the executive office, the executive branch of the government, does not have the authority nor the ability to forgive this. It is not in his wheelhouse. The president only has the authority to execute the laws by, ostensibly, any means necessary that Congress has passed. Meaning that if Biden wanted to pass this law, or if Biden wanted to execute this law, he first needed to have Congress pass the law. And Congress did not pass the law. So when he attempted to do it, the Supreme Court came out and shut it down, saying that this is unenforceable. That he has overstepped his boundaries, and he cannot do this. Now, here's where we come back to Hanlon's razor. Let's apply Hanlon's razor to this. Do not attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity. Now, let's say that the Biden administration put this forward, okay, and said that we want to forgive all of this student loan. Many people said he can't do that. However, the people in the streets, the citizenry, are not legal scholars. And so while the people in the street may not be happy about what's going on, the people in the street are not qualified to tell him that he cannot do a thing. Not legally, anyway. It is true that the government is supposed to stand for and by the people. Therefore, if the people of the nation do not want something, the president should probably not be doing it. And so, we can go ahead and attribute to stupidity, ignorance, whatever you want to call it, the fact that Biden went ahead and tried to do this, or at least commanded his administration to do it. However, when the Supreme Court stepped in and told him that he couldn't, by telling him that the executive branch did not have the authority and he did not have the power to, the Supreme Court are legal scholars. They are appointed to the bench because they are legal scholars, and they know what they're talking about. They, ostensibly, again, are more or less unquestioned when it comes to the interpretation of the law. And so when the Supreme Court tells you that you cannot do this, you can only really argue against it and try to convince them that they are wrong. And then maybe they give you the green light to do so. In this case, that did not happen. So Biden has now been stripped of his ignorance and stupidity. He knows full well that he has been told, this cannot be done. This is a gross abuse of political power. It is an abuse of the office. No longer are we dealing with the idea of stupidity, which means that we can now erase this entire part of the razor, okay? It is no longer adequately explained by stupidity. And if it is no longer adequately explained by stupidity, we can also strike the never. Okay? Because this is no longer a dichotomy. It is a singular statement. Without ignorance on his side, we can now only assume that he is attributing this to, or we can now attribute this to malice. Now, how do we know it's malice? That is a bit more subjective. Obviously, it's not going to be sold that way, and the Biden administration is literally selling this as an improvement to the economy. It's taking people out of debt. Now, these 3.5 million borrowers will no longer be saddled by the student debt. This means that, technically speaking, these people, since they're not paying back their student loans, will be able to go buy things, or houses, or cars, or whatever. The idea being that now, whatever they're making with their college, education, should be cycled back into the economy. On its face, it's a very generous move. But again, anybody who understands the basics of economics will be able to tell you that what you've done is not forgive their loans, you have simply made everyone else pay them off. The money was given by the government, and so there is a great big hole in the government's budget that now must be filled. And they have simply decided they're not going to fill that hole. They're going to say, you know what? We printed all this money, we gave all the money away, and now we're not going to ask for it back. Okay? The debts have been erased, but the hole remains. And so what's going to happen here is, as Einstein said, nature abhors a vacuum. The money that was given was tax money. Every single loan that was given was money that was given to the government in terms of taxes. And those taxes came from everybody else who was not going to college. For every individual person, it may have simply been, a paltry few dollars times the 325 million-ish people that are in the US. And the goal should have been that when the students pay their debts back, now that money can be reinvested into the country. Now that tax money is simply gone. And taxes will be continued, or they will be raised to fill that hole. Oh, and I see that Malachi's in here. Hello, Malachi. Malachi says he's late. That's fine, though. That's fine. Also says it's also arguably that as with all untested powers, someone has to be the first to try it. While this is true, they did try it. The administration did try it at the beginning of this term, which is why I said when it first happened, we cannot attribute it to malice. It was tried, even though many in the citizenry said you can't do it. And at that point, even though a lot of people said it was wrong, nobody could necessarily claim that it was necessarily evil. Or at least I wouldn't have. I know that some people did, and there is an argument to be made there. We are talking about the President of the United States. We are talking about somebody who is literally surrounded by advisors and experts in their particular fields all day. And so, attributing any kind of ignorance to the president may be a bit unjustifiably generous. But I'm going to go ahead and be unjustifiably generous in this case, just because this case is so egregious. Malachi also said, going to have to disagree about malice being the only option. The Casey report shows that corporate profits are up 75%, making it good old plain greed. Fine taxes there. I'm not going to argue with that one. I do agree that there are issues with the tax system. Like the fact that the tax system exists at all, but we're not going to get into that one right now. And are there problems with corporate taxes? Absolutely. But I'm not discussing that right now. Because I actually don't care where the taxes come from. Whether it comes from the corporate establishment or whether it comes from the people. The fact is that taxes were taken in, redistributed to students in college and university. And now we're no longer going to recoup those. Which means that when we talk about taxation being theft, and I'm a big fan of calling taxation theft. In this case, it is literally theft. It was taken from people and then given to somebody else. And I see that Tux is in here. Tux says, I'm down with forgiving student loans for loans that haven't resulted in a decent paying job for the student in 6 years after graduation. I understand the sentiment on that one, but how do you prove it? You would really have to take that one to court to argue it. I'm not saying it's not a bad idea, and I'm not saying it's not possible, but I do think that it would be restrictively difficult to do. Now, on a certain level, I am actually kinda up for people who went into college and got useless degrees that they were pushed into doing. Like, any degree that you go into that only results in you working for the university, I think is kind of a useless degree. The popular punching bag for this one would be women's studies, or African American studies, or pretty much any kind of anthropological studies that does not deal exclusively in anthropological history. Because the only places where those jobs have any kind of use is in a university setting, which means it is literally a useless class to make useless professors to teach useless classes. And that is just an enormous waste of time, money, and resources. So, yeah, I'm for actually maybe forgiving those under the assumption that we send these people back to college, maybe on a free ride, okay? Maybe they get a free ride there. Like, we waive their fees so long as they go into something with an actual tangible outcome. However, that's a whole can of worms that I don't think that I can straighten out. Let's see, I actually have to scroll up a little bit. Let's see, Malachi says, more than one way to skin a cat. I find that offensive. Forgiveness may be, let's see. Forgiveness, one may have had an issue. Maybe forgiveness 2, student loan boogaloo is them trying to find a new way. Well, yes and no. It is absolutely them trying to find a new way to do it. However, the way they're doing it is kind of the same way that New York dealt with their gun control issue. After the Bruin decision, and the Supreme Court told the state of New York that you are not allowed to restrict people from keeping and bearing arms, except in obviously some certain sensitive areas, like, say, courthouses. New York came out and said, fine, we'll just declare the entire state a sensitive area. When the Supreme Court came back again and said you can't do that because it's overly broad, New York said, fine, we'll make the entire state a sensitive area except for private residences. And so on and so forth, and New York City continues to fight that battle today. This is done in the same bill. The first one was stopped, and so they simply reworded it and did it again. Tuck says, then stick the college with the bill, ideally. I would love to stick the college with the bill. However, if we do that, we don't actually fix the problem. Because if we stick the college with the bill, then to pay off the bill, the college will simply raise tuition rates for everything else. And then all the students who are coming in the next semester will get loans to pay for the higher tuition, putting them further in debt. And then if we go with what you said, if they can't get anything, then we forgive their loan and put it back on the university. So now the university's debt goes up and they increase their tuition there, and you see where we're not solving the problem. It's not a bad idea, but it doesn't actually address the problem. Tuck said, I understand the idea of you took the loan, you repay it, but we're dealing with kids straight out of high school who haven't had a single day of work. There's a lot to unpack there. Okay. You took the loan, you repay it. That is true. Okay? This is life. Okay? Once you get out of school, I mean, no one else is going to hold your hand on this one. If you take a loan, you have to repay it. The problem with university loans is that they are predatory. Many of them are, because of the tuition rates, are many times larger than they ever needed to be in the first place. It should not cost you $600 for a book. It should not cost you several $1,000s for a class that is literally measured in the double digits of hours. They say, you're going to come to this class for 3 hours a day, twice a week. So that's 6 hours a week. The semester runs for, how long is a semester? How long is a semester? I'm not sure. I'm going to call a semester like 4 months. So 6 hours a week times 4 weeks is 24 times 4 months is 96. So 96 hours of class time should not cost you thousands of dollars. Okay, that's another problem. But we're dealing with kids straight out of high school. Yes, we are. Who haven't had a single day of work. Why not? This is a legitimate question. Why haven't more kids had any kind of work experience by the time they get out of high school? Again, there's a lot to unpack there. We can talk about how the school system is overly bloated and how we probably spend more time in school than we need to. We can talk about the homework problem, where, especially once you get into high school, students are being laden with a half an hour to an hour worth of homework per class. And with a 6-hour schedule or a 6-class or sometimes 7-class schedule, that can lead to anywhere from, if I do my math real quick, 3.5 to 7 hours of homework a night. Then, if you try to tack on things like extracurricular activities, which you need to get into college or university, because they look really good in the transcript, where are they supposed to find time for a job? But now we can go back and ask, how much value are you really getting from college in the first place to make it so important? And do they really need that much homework and all of those extracurriculars? There's a big problem in the education system as a whole. And to be honest, this right here, this is a symptom of a larger problem. But even though it is a symptom of a larger problem, it is still a problem in and of itself. Fixing this will not fix the entire education system, but it is something that we have to address all the same. Let's see, Malachi said, tax records, graduate 6 years later, submit the last 6 years of tax returns showing unemployment and income, and whapow, there's your qualification for forgiveness. That's not a bad idea, although it will still have to be argued in court. Because they will have to determine, and they will have attorneys on both sides arguing this, and unfortunately, the university, which is probably going to be the defendant in this case, is going to have really, really kick-ass lawyers. I'm sorry, but that's just how it's going to go. But they're going to have to argue what was underemployment, what was unemployment. Because, 6 years, you're not going to go 6 years unemployed generally. However, 6 years underemployed, that's arguable. But what does underemployed mean? Because if you got a job, or if you got a degree in, say, I went to school for network administration, okay? I was in college for network administration. What if I never got my job as a network administrator? I ended up working on I ended up working the mailroom of the place. Okay? Has nothing to do with my degree. Would I still be eligible for student loan forgiveness, knowing full well that I'm actually in the company and I might still have the ability to get that job later on? That's why I say that it would be arguable. Not that it shouldn't be done, though. I'm actually on board with that. It's not a bad idea. Tuck says, after 6 years, if the person hasn't obtained a decent paying job and earned money from it, their tax records will show. That's true, but they could have a decent paying job that's not related to their degree. I mean, anybody who went to college has the work ethic generally to do well. And so anybody who has that kind of work ethic is not generally going to sit by idly. They could actually be doing pretty well. But it might not be related to what they're doing. And so is that person still eligible for the debt relief? I don't know. That's why it would have to be argued. Malachi says, but you're competing with the military for free college. That's true, I suppose. I don't really have a comment on that one. I mean, yes, the military gives you, quote, free college, unquote. The military does not give you free college. Okay? You have paid with literal blood and sweat. And maybe tears. But I mean, they don't tolerate crying in boot camp. But you have paid for your college if you went into the military. Okay? It's not free college. You are owed college. Why do you think the GI Bill exists? Let's go back in history a little bit. The GI Bill existed because prior to World War I, it was expected that men would go through and they would serve king and country. Or in our case, president and country. Okay? And they would do so because that's just what men do. That's what you're expected to do. And then World War I happened. Now, when World War I happened, a lot of things happened at once. Number one, World War I was a conflict on a scale the world had never seen before. We had seen war before, okay? We had seen battles. We had seen death. We had seen death on scales that were difficult to comprehend. World War I, however, industrialized death. It industrialized massacre, and it damaged an entire generation of people. And I do say people because it was women who got traumatized during that time too. Nobody escaped World War I and II. No one in the world. And so after World War I was over and the men came home, there were a lot of questions that were asked. One of them was, what happens if this happens again? Okay? Because if we're going to be sending a large swath of our men over to another nation to die by the thousands, maybe those men should have a say in when we actually go to war. And thus, all men, at least all white men at that time, were given the right to vote. Now, the men who would be dying when the next war rolled around would have a say, at least through representation, on whether or not we go to war again. Another thing that happened was We had grown by leaps and bounds in terms of technology during the First World War. We were already industrializing, okay? We had already gone to steam power, we were already working on electric power, we already had giant manufacturing factories. But now, because so much of that had been modernized and expanded for production in the war effort, we needed people who could run it. And now we had a lot of men who were just like, I can't go back to what I was doing before, whatever that job might have been. I need to be able to do something else in this new modern world. And so the GI Bill came around saying, you know what? You're right. And it was the government who plucked you out of your life, sent you to Europe, threw you in a trench in mud up to your knees, forced you to live, sleep, and eat in a gas mask for weeks to months at a time, while being shelled and sniped and everything else, and then we brought you back home, where your entire life is now gone. You're right. We should get you back on track, and thus the GI Bill came out, saying that if you were in the military service, we will help you to get back to a productive citizen again. And that, of course, has just been expanded to basically just be free college. But it's not free college. I mean, you have paid for it. Okay. Malachi says, non-starter, they need that benefit. I want to talk about it, but I don't remember exactly what that was in reference to. Tux says, this depends on government not subsidizing useless loans. Absolutely. Not going to argue that point. Stop spending money on useless things. And that's not just including school. That's including like a lot of things. Stop spending money on useless garbage. Malachi says they'll just stop offering any classes refunded over a certain percentage, which kills teacher jobs and retention. Okay, but stick with me on that one. Okay, they'll just stop offering any classes refunded over a certain percentage. That means that the students graduating from those classes that never found a job in their field, those classes will go away. And while that does kill teacher jobs and retention, well, that means that the teachers are in the same position as the students. Because if the teacher made a job in what we can now establish firmly was a useless class to begin with, then obviously the teacher in that class has made some mistakes. This is really not the argument that I think you're trying to make. This is actually all a good thing. This is a way of making sure that the college cuts out the deadwood, as it were. Tuck says it wouldn't be argued in court. It would be argued when the policy passes. Any lawsuit would be college versus government. Except that we literally established that you would have to have the student, graduate, whatever, come in and make the argument. So it would be essentially the college versus the student. The government may be there as well in representation. We're not talking like a criminal case here. And we're not even technically talking about a civil case because no law has been broken. What we're actually talking about is going to be some kind of court-appointed mediation. And again, I'm still on board for it. I kind of like the idea. Tuck said, according to 6-year tax forgiveness thing, if you found a decent job but not the one you want or expected, you don't get the refund. Okay, and I'm fine with that. But again, these are questions that will have to be asked when the policy is being drafted. Malachi says, I'm not saying it's an easy ride or free, but I am saying that 4 of my friends enlisted exclusively for college benefits. I mean, let's face it, why else are you joining for the military? There's only 3 reasons to join the military. Number 1, service. You just really want to serve, okay? And good on you. You're probably the only person who's going to walk away from this with satisfaction. Number 2, pension. You figure you're going to go in there, you're going to do your time, you're going to get a sweet pension walking out of it, and you'll be good the rest of your life. Except it's probably not going to be as good a pension as you think it is. Not unless you get really high up. Like if you can get up to, say, captain, before you retire, you'll probably have a nice pension. But if you don't make it up any higher than, say, I don't know, sergeant? I don't know. Or, as you pointed out, college benefits. I'm going to go in, I'm going to do the bare minimum, I'm going to get the GI Bill, and then I'm going to go to college for free. Except as we've found out, yeah, that doesn't always work, because sometimes your tour gets extended. And then the extension gets extended, and then the extension for the extension gets extended. And so, yeah, that doesn't always work out either. JP is in the chat. Hello, JP. Good to see you here. Says, I went to war and all I got was this GI Bill and a lifetime knee disability. Well, I mean, it's the military. At least you still have a knee. Some people didn't get out that easily. Let's see. Then Malachi says, the core class teachers, English credits on the diploma, math, science, all that refunded. I'm not sure about that one. But then again, I always thought that was kind of, weird. Because when I went into college, they said that I needed to do remedial classes on, I think it was math and English. But the funny thing is, it's like I'm literally only 1 year out of high school. And all of my grades were good enough in high school to pass. But you think that I need remedial classes in college? No, I really don't. I just needed to teach me what the skills that I need to do the job you're preparing me for. I'm not sure how I feel about having these core classes in college and university settings. I just don't. And Tuck says, I don't think that was ever established. I'm not sure what you're referring to there. JP says, the pensions are decent, but what makes them attractive is that these pensioners don't pay medical, dental, vision, mental health prescription bills. That adds up a lot as you age. And that is fair. Okay, that's a fair point. And Malachi says, we all know no matter what, when the profit side of the university college takes financial hits, they'll start axing all but their best teachers, resulting in everyone losing. Again, I disagree, because if it's the classes that were underperforming that are getting axed, I see this only as an absolute win. The classes that do not seem to have any kind of future benefit, no future profit, no future careers, anything like that, if they're gone, I think the college actually benefits from it. I think that society as a whole benefits from it. And if the teachers from those classes lose their jobs because of it, they are already teachers. They already did it once. I don't see how they cannot learn to do something else. Even if it's still teaching. Learn to teach something else that's actually proving itself useful. And Tuck says, I actually agree with Shadowcat for once. Don't care about those teachers. Oh, well, now the inner contrarian in me wants to say the opposite. How dare you make me agree with Malachi? Wait, no, but I'm kind of already agreeing with Malachi. Now who am I supposed to disagree with? I'm going back to my articles. So anyway. now that we've established how college works and how college is broken, we can come back to this. And we can say, these people took out loans for things that are sometimes useful, sometimes not useful, but all of this has been paid for in tax dollars. And it's been said that, interestingly enough, the Supreme Court never actually said that it couldn't be done. The Supreme Court said that it could not be done in that way. That Congress would have to pass the law that says that we can forgive this much, and then the executive office can, as the name implied, execute it. So, on its face, regardless of what people thought, the Supreme Court didn't say, no, you're wrong for doing it. They just said you're doing it the wrong way. Do it the other way, do it the proper way, and we can't stop you. But that isn't how they did it. This is also the same thing that happened during the eviction moratorium. When the executive came out, Congress wasn't actually involved in that one. When the executive came out and said, you can't evict people, we said so. And the Supreme Court said you can't do that. It is not within your purview of power. The executive office cannot make law. It cannot make policy. But it was done anyway. And what we've seen as a result of this is we have seen an executive office that is unchained. It's an executive office that doesn't actually care about the rule of law, about the policy of procedure, even about very simple checks and balances between our three branches of government. What we are seeing is somebody who does not care. Not the president, not the administration around him. And so we have to assume that they know what they're doing. They know that they are breaking the law, that they are violating the Constitution itself and the division of powers. They're, of course, going to justify this by saying that we are doing this for the good of the people. And I can't argue that one because that's going to be their own personal opinions and thoughts. But regardless of whatever they say to justify it, the fact is they know they're breaking the law. And they're going to do it anyway, and in this case, literally twice on Sunday. Because this isn't even the second time. This was just the latest 813,000 of an already 3.5 million. This is not the first time they've done this, and they will continue to do this, I'm sure. This is why I brought up Hanlon's razor in the first place, because these are people that are willing to do wrong, even if they think they're doing right. And people who have been willing to do wrong because they thought they were in the right throughout history have generally been regarded as evil people. I know there are always going to be exceptions, but the exceptions are going to prove the rules. And this is not the only case that I've got today, even though we just spent an hour talking about college debt. Didn't think we were going to do that. I thought this was going to be a short one today. But why don't we move on to something else? Something a little bit more down to earth. This was just the first one that I pulled up, and it was the one that struck me the most, because it's just another log on the fire here. I mean, the current administration has violated so many constitutional amendments. They've violated so many laws. What's one more? But I want to move a little further west, a little further north. We're going to Chicago. So this is a story that came out earlier this week. This one's only 2 days old. And in Chicago, they have a big migrant problem. Now, the reason why Chicago has a migrant problem is twofold. Number one, Chicago, a long, long time ago, I believe this was back during the Summer of Love days, declared itself that it was going to be a sanctuary city, nay, sanctuary state. But mostly it's just Chicago, so we'll just say Chicago City. It's going to be a sanctuary city, which means that they refuse to cooperate with immigration officials from the federal government. They will not report, they will not arrest, and they will not assist anyone from the federal government that comes in there. Not for immigration, at least. That was the first part of the problem for them. The second part is that when the southern states, particularly Texas, but there were a couple others, kept getting slammed with influxes of migrants coming across the border, places like Texas said, okay, fine. I need a list of all the sanctuary cities. We are sending all the people to the sanctuary cities. And just like that, Texas has been sending buses and planes all the way across the country to New York, to Chicago, to California, to, I want to say, Baltimore? No. Anyway, lots of places. They've just been shipping them all over. And what's funny here is that the chickens have finally come home to roost, because many of the people who live in these cities, who at first were all on board for being a sanctuary city and helping out those in need, are now realizing that when you do that, and when everybody comes, suddenly there's not enough for anybody. Which they're finding out now the hard way. Because after hundreds of thousands of people suddenly entered Chicago, now there is nowhere to put them. There is nowhere to feed them. There's not enough food to feed them. There's not enough cloth to clothe them. There's simply not enough to go around to handle an influx of tens of thousands of people all at once. Now, at first, residents in Chicago were upset by this because, well, all the resources are drying up. You can't go get a hotel room because all the hotels are filled. Your children going to school have to miss out on classes because the gymnasiums and some of the classrooms are being turned into shelters. And wherever you go, you can see that the public accommodations are being shut down because they're being renovated to simply house more people who really have no long-term plans. They're just trying to make it up as they go along and hoping it all works out in the end. And as has been happening, people are starting to realize the error of their ways. They're saying, I wanted my children to go to school, and now the school is a shelter. Now my children have to go to a different school. Or maybe I have to do something like online learning because there's no school anymore. Many people in the needy communities are finding out that they're going to, like, food pantries. And there's no food pantries anymore because all of that food has been diverted to deal with the influx of migrants. And the residents have been speaking out. This article here comes from, well, it comes after a long list of other articles talking about just that, how residents have been protesting. They have been speaking out. Now, this one's a bit of a touchy subject, because there's no good solutions in this one. There really isn't. But what we can talk about is what's being done. In Chicago, what they're doing is, because they have such a problem, what they're doing is they say, we need these people to go somewhere. And so what we're going to do is we're going to build a shelter. Because it is Chicago, and Chicago winters are rough. As so many of the migrants that are showing up there are finding out the hard way. Many of them are actually trying to flee Chicago now that they've gotten there and now that winter is setting in. Chicago winters, they're bad. Not as bad as Michigan winters, but still pretty bad. However, now that Chicago is trying desperately to build it at the beginning of winter, this brick and mortar migrant shelter. People are starting to ask the question of, is this a solution? Because if we start building these shelters, this is not encouraging a solution to the problem. This is actually encouraging more people to come, because if we're going to build one, well, when it fills up, we'll have to build another, and when that one fills up, we'll have to build another, and sooner or later, there's going to be more non-residents in the city than there are actual residents. And there'll be no more schools, and no more shops, and no more anything, because all the resources are being diverted there. So why did I include this article? Because this article on its face, it just seems like another, case of democracy working. People are trying to protest, people are trying to vote, people are trying to exercise their rights of expression and everything. How is this a case? Well, the reason is the mayor. The mayor has come out and stated, and I wonder if it's in here somewhere. I need an add-on that can actually, highlight things. No, I don't see it in here. Not at a quick glance anyway. The problem is the mayor, because while people are going to City Hall, they are sitting in on the City Hall meetings and everything, talking about how they don't want this. Okay, they are making their voices heard. The mayor has come out and stated that it's happening. And he doesn't care what the people are saying, because he cares about Chicago as a whole, and he says that Chicago is a sanctuary city and all are welcome, even though the people who actually live in these neighborhoods that are being affected don't want it. But he doesn't care. Which is where we get back into Hamlin's razor. When we look at what he's doing, we can say Chicago is a sanctuary city. Okay? And so it has been open. And the people that were there voted for it. They didn't know what they were voting for when they did it, but they did it all the same. And so their representation reflected that and said, okay, if you want us to be a sanctuary city, we will be a sanctuary city. Now, however, the residents of Chicago have said that we don't want this anymore. Okay? We are the people who live here, and we don't want it. And now the mayor has come out and said, I don't care. You're going to get it. We're going to have more of it. We're not even going to stop the influx of people coming. We're going to encourage more of it. And we're going to build more shelters. And we're going to take over more buildings. See, before, it was very easy to claim ignorance in terms of what they were doing, because you, of course, had many people online who were pointing out that this will not end well. Sometimes, however, people have to learn by doing. One of my favorite expressions that I ever came up with is I said, those who do not learn by God's word shall be taught by his hand. It's a wonderful phrase that I use every single time that I can. And in this case, these people had to learn by God's hand. And they did. And Tuck says, this is a situation where I don't really feel sorry for most of the people that live there. They voted, they got what they voted for. It's literally what I just said. Glad we're on the same page. No, they did get it. However, they learned. And they learned quickly. But now that they've learned, the mayor, who is supposed to be acting in their best interest, refuses to do anything about it. Because we, on the outside, like what Tuck said, they did vote for it. They made their bed and now they have to sleep in it. We can sit here and say that because we do not have any responsibility. We do not hold any representation in Chicago. We do not live in Chicago. This is not our business. It's not even in our wheelhouse. However, that being said, the people who do actually represent the citizens of Chicago do have that responsibility. And for them to go against that responsibility and say, I'm not doing what you want, I'm doing what I want because what I want is better for you. That is malicious. That is somebody putting themselves over the citizens that they are there to represent. So we can take off that second part of the razor. We can say that you no longer have adequate stupidity to explain this. Okay? You have been in the city conference meetings. You have listened to the people tell you they don't want this. But you're going to do it anyway. This is a case of where we can actually point to someone and say, that is you doing what you know people don't want, you know it's making them unhappy, you know it's putting them in fear or putting them in danger, you know what the consequences of this are, and you are going to inflict those consequences upon the people with full knowledge. Doing wrong intentionally is the definition of evil. And Tuck says, I do find Shadowcat reads comments and thinks we're disagreeing when we're just commenting. I mean, that is fair. However, I'm a very contrarian person, so I look for arguments. And if I can't find an argument, I'll make up an argument. It's just who I am. I really should have been on the debate team when I was in school. Probably would have had fun. Okay, I need a drink. Where's my drink? There it is. So we're going to take a step down here. We're going to go from a city now down to an organization. And we're going to be talking about individual people. Because this is another story that came out last weekend, I think it was. I'm not sure. I don't know how many people saw this one, but it's from the New York Post. Wrongly shaming kid for blackface is a gross virtue signal. So this article came out November 30th, so 2 days ago, but the actual incident, I believe, happened last weekend, over the Thanksgiving holiday weekend. The story is actually very simple. There's not a lot to this one. There was a football game. When people go to football games, they dress up. One of the things they usually do to dress up is face paint. And so we have a child here who went to a game, and it is the Kansas City Chiefs, I believe it is. I know they're the Chiefs. I think it's Kansas. Not a big football person. But he wore a headdress. You can see it right here. It's a very nice headdress, actually. I'm a little jealous. That's really cool. And wore, of course, the team's colors. On any other day, this would have been regarded as absolutely normal or enviable. Because how many other Chiefs fans would have loved to have done the same thing? But all they can find is some face paint. I mean, where do you even get a headdress like that? I don't know. What happened is, and I wonder if they show it down here somewhere. I don't see it. But what had happened was, someone on the internet, because it's what the internet is for, I guess, a writer for an online rag called Deadspin saw the child and saw them, or the child in profile, I believe it was. Yeah, here's the picture that was taken. And called this offensive to the highest degree. Because what do you have in this picture? Number one, you have blackface. And we all know how racist blackface is. Blackface is the most racist thing that we've ever seen before. Blackface is so racist that even Germany said, wow. And then in addition to that, you have this kid wearing a tribal headdress, which is just cultural appropriation. Or you could even call it the red face of blackface. Because, you know, why does the kid get to wear a headdress like that? And so this picture was taken and it was plastered all over the internet. And everybody was invited to pile onto a literal child. A child. Look at how old this child is. Does it even say how old? Let's see. Pint-sized Kansas... I was right. Kansas City Chiefs fan. I don't see in here... Mind you, my reading's not that great. I don't see in here anywhere where it says how old, and maybe they intentionally... Oh, wait, hold on. It's actually right here in the video. 9 years old. I'm observant. Literally looking at it the whole time. 9 years old, okay? 9. And they are turning this kid into the scapegoat, okay? Literally, they want to take the goat and set it on fire. And that will cleanse them of all their sins. That's what they did with the scapegoat, right? Or did they just, like, send it off somewhere? I don't remember. Either way. Point is, 9 years old. And accusing this kid of literally all the racisms. All the racisms. All of them. Every racism you can think of. I don't know how the airplane tribes in the Pacific Islands are offended by this, but I'm sure it's racist against them for some reason. Now, this has not gone over well, because even every normal person took one look at what's happening here and said, this is crossing a line. There is a very, very small group of people who are actually holding this up and saying that this is a problem. Which is a good thing. I mean, we want these people to be on the margins. These people should be a very slim margin. I'm not saying that they're never not going to exist. I mean, these people will always exist. But as long as they are just a slim margin, that's fine. The point is that somebody thought that it was their goal in life, okay, it was their duty to come out and shame a child for dressing up and going to a football game. Now, interestingly enough, this did backfire in a spectacular way. Because while you have some groups that are simply saying, you know, this is a gross virtue signal, as it turns out, this child is, I think they said 25% Native American. And actually used to live on a reservation. So not only is this targeting a child, which is gross on its own, but now, if we're going to play by their own rules, it's actually targeting a minority who was dressed up in his own cultural garb. Yeah, bad day for these people. But the point is, I don't want to talk about the kid. I don't really want to talk about what happened. We just needed that as a foundation. Because what I want to talk about is this, okay? Helen's Razor. We've established this. This is our foundation for today's lecture. Do we attribute to malice, or do we attribute to stupidity? Now, I look at the comments, and I see that Tuck said, I feel like he had to pick that picture, knowing what the whole kid's face looked like. I don't disagree with you. I think that whoever posted this, that this writer, and it was like Karen something, I don't remember. Doesn't matter. I think you're right. This writer had to go through all the pictures that were in there to find the one where the kid is in perfect profile, and you cannot see the red half at all. Now, there are actually some people arguing that the red half makes it worse, because now it's double the racism. It's not just blackface, it's also red face. That's not the point. Point is, this person took a picture out of a football game, where I guarantee this kid was not the only one painted like this. They took an actual child, knowing that children are generally innocent. Children generally don't understand these whole concepts of racism. They don't do things maliciously to hurt other people, in general. The kid apparently likes football and wanted to go dressed up. And it's not even the first time. One of these pictures down here... Where was it? Here's an older picture. There he is. With, I think, the same headdress on. Somebody went through and did this intentionally. They knew what they were doing. They knew it was a football game. They didn't care. They knew that it was a child. They didn't care. This was literally somebody hunting for their pound of flesh. Somebody who thought that they could destroy a child's life. They could destroy a child's life. They could ruin him for the rest of his life. Paint this child as a racist and have this follow them because the internet is forever. This kid's name is out there. Okay? And anybody, any future college or university, any future employer will be able to go on the internet, type in this kid's name, and what's going to come up? Oh, look, racist child. And by the way, just because the most people acknowledge that this was wrong, this is still going to stay up. This was somebody trying to make their career off the entire future and life of a child. There is no way that you can claim stupidity or ignorance on this one. And so, all we have left is malice. This person wanted to harm a child. And this person probably wants to harm a whole lot of other people too, because this is what that person does. I guarantee, working for a rag like Deadspin, Deadspin is just an online rag. It's a bit like, say, Salon and all these places. All they are is just drama and gossip rags, and all they do is just try to stir the pot. This is a case of somebody who is absolutely evil. Knowingly, willingly, just, yeah. And we'll come back to this, because part of this is what can we do about it. And once we get through all the examples that I have picked up here, we'll get back into that. And Malachi says, kind of shushed after comments, thoughts weren't communicated clearly enough. That's fine. You don't have to shush, though. Look, if I held back every thought of mine that I didn't think was perfectly formed, I wouldn't be doing this lecture. I mean, this is so off the cuff, I'm wearing a t-shirt, okay? There's no cuffs left. There's no sleeves left. It's never going to be perfect. So don't ever hold back. If you have expressions, express them. All right, last one. And then we'll go back and we'll discuss what we can do about these things. We're going to jump across the pond. So I don't know if anyone was paying attention to Ireland recently, because Ireland was on fire, which was kind of weird for Ireland because Ireland's not usually on fire. However, in Ireland, there was a woman and children injured in knife attacks. Oh, and Tuck says, it does get difficult making arguments in 200 characters or less. Yeah, it's called the Twitter problem. I can't help with that. However, you can make as many posts as you want in 200 characters or less. So there's always that. I don't think they put us on a limit of like 200 comments or less. I better not suggest it either, otherwise YouTube will do it, and then they'll make you pay extra to post over the 200 comments. I don't want to give them ideas. Anyway. It was hard to actually find a lot of information because a lot of information on this has been censored. I mean, especially coming out of the UK, especially going through Google, there's been a lot of censorship on this one. But let's see what we can get. Let me see if I can make this bigger so I can actually read it. Let's see. Can I find any information on... Here we go. The violence broke out after 3 young children and a woman were attacked in Parnell Square East in the north of the city center. Police detained a man in his 50s who was also being treated for injuries, said they were not seeking any other suspects. The incident happened at about 1:30 p.m. on Thursday outside of a school. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. That's probably Gaelic. I don't speak Gaelic. Police said that a 5-year-old girl, a woman in her 30s, and a man in his 50s sustained serious injuries. The girl was receiving emergency medical treatment. A 5-year-old boy and 6-year-old girl were treated for less severe injuries. The boy was discharged from the hospital. SUPT. I'm sure it's a title, but it's not one that I'm familiar with. Liam appealed to anyone with information about the incident, including mobile phone footage of the attack and its aftermath, to come forward. He praised bystanders who intervened when what he said was a traumatic and dangerous incident. Okay? So this is what happened. There was a guy, guess he had a knife. Don't know why he did this, but there was a woman and 3 children outside of a school, and he had to practice his stabbing. And that's what's happened. The woman was stabbed badly. A girl was stabbed badly. 2 other kids were also stabbed less badly. And eventually he was taken into custody. Okay? That is what happened. And that's really all we need to worry about right now. People are still arguing over what was the reason for it. I don't really care what the reason for it. That's not what I want to talk about today. Is it important? Yes. Just not the topic of today. What I do want to talk about is the response to it. Now, the immediate response was bad because the Irish people took to the streets and they said, you know, after Ireland has taken in so many migrants, after the crime rate has literally gone up by dozens to hundreds of %, now we're drawing the line, okay? We have tolerated all we're going to tolerate. We are tolerating no more. And so they took to the streets and they rioted, saying, get these people out. Which is why it says here, a crowd chanting anti-immigration slogans clashes with police for hours after a stabbing incident outside the school. If we want details on this, they were clashes with riot police as some demonstrators set off flares and fireworks. Others grabbed chairs and stools from outside bars and restaurants. A police cordon was set up around the Irish Parliament building. Leinster House? I'm not sure. And officers from the Garda Mounted Support Unit were in nearby Grafton Street. More than 400 Irish police officers were involved at the height of the response. In a video on social media, I have no idea what that title is still. Patrick McMenamin, that's a fun name, said some members of the police force had been attacked and assaulted. However, said there were no serious injuries. Now, here's where we get into this, okay? Of course, the Irish Justice Minister came out and said that these scenes were intolerable, thuggish, and manipulative elements. They must not be allowed to use an appalling tragedy to wreak havoc. Okay. Now, was this intolerable? Yes. Yes, it was. Riots are never the way to go. And as a matter of fact, when we look at things like the vehicle on fire up here, what does that accomplish? It does not accomplish anything. I mean, burning down buses, burning down cars, assaulting police officers, this is not going to accomplish the goals that you want. And the goals that people want are going to be a reestablishment of an Irish nation. Because they feel like they're losing it. And they feel like if people can just come in and stab people for being Irish, then what does anybody living there have? Okay? Whether they're right or wrong, I mean, we are talking about the left here, by and large, and feelings are supposed to be genuine, okay? You are allowed to feel what you want. Your feelings are sincere. You know, until it comes to it being your own people. The commissioner said this was a complete lunatic faction driven by far-right ideology. Yes, the far-right ideology of saying that Ireland should be for the Irish. By claiming that the Irish have nowhere else to go, this is their country, send the other people home. So we can argue back and forth over whether these people are right or wrong. I'm not going to get into it. I have my own opinions on it. And if we want to talk about them, we can do that. What I do want to talk about, however, is the response. Because obviously we just talked about how the politicians came out and condemned all of it, labeling anybody who was involved in the riot as some kind of far-right terrorist lunatic. But this story continues on after that. There's a very interesting article that I wanted to pull up. This is from the BBC. This is from West Belfast, which I believe is also in Ireland, I'm not sure. It says, anti-immigration signage a hate incident. Now, the idea of a hate crime is already a hotly debated one. What is a hate crime? And is there even such thing as a hate crime? Or do we just have crime? I don't know. And I'm not going to argue about that one today. What I will say, though, is let's go ahead and assume that hate crimes are a thing and that hate crimes deserve all of our attention. It says Irish lives matter. This is 2023. We are literally only 3 years on from the Summer of Love, when Black Lives Matter rocked the world. When Black Lives Matter was literally marching in every single Western country. When we had cities like Minneapolis or Seattle or New York that had riots and fire and destroyed vehicles and everything else. When Black Lives Matter did it, it was simply the language of the unheard. It was people standing up for their lives and their livelihoods. When we see Irish Lives Matter, it is a hate incident and something to be suppressed. This is not a new argument. We of course saw this during the Summer of Love when you had the competing group All Lives Matter. People would come out and they would say All Lives Matter and they would be branded as racist for reasons that nobody could really adequately explain. But even though that has all gone by the wayside now we go to Ireland where they say Irish Lives Matter. And this is now a hate incident. And the people who put this up, even though we'll probably never find out who they were, are now going to be branded as racist and possibly terrorists because it is a hate incident. It's very interesting, I think, because if we go back and we look at the novel 1984, one of the key tenets in 1984 that Orwell put forward was the idea of doublethink. Doublethink was the ability to hold two ideas, two contradictory ideas in your mind at the same time, and acknowledge that both of them were true. And we see that as an expression right now. One group does it, and they are paragons of social justice. Another group does it, and they're hateful. Even though the actions are literally the same, with one difference: the group being propped up. This is an excellent example of doublespeak, or rather doublethink, I guess, in real time. Problem is that 1984 was supposed to be a cautionary tale, not an instruction manual, because this is supposed to be a bad thing. And anybody who has any kind of common sense would agree with this, which means that we have to look at the people who put out this article and the politicians and city planners and everyone else who actually stood behind this and said that this was a hateful incident, and we have to question them. We have to say, number one, what you're doing here, is this right? Okay? If we're going to condemn this, do we also condemn what Black Lives Matter did? Or, if we do not condemn what Black Lives Matter did, do we also allow this? We have the advantage of hindsight now, where we can see what happened before. We know what we said before. We're on record with what we said before and how we felt about it before. We cannot claim any kind of ignorance here. I suppose you could potentially argue that maybe you changed your mind on things, but that would mean you have to change your mind on what happened 3 years ago as well. So what is it? Are you changing your mind, or is this blatant hypocrisy? The answer, of course, is going to be it's blatant hypocrisy. And so, with full knowledge of what you're doing, can we attribute this to malice? Well, again, we have all the records showing that you know what's going on. You know what you said before about it. You know. You cannot claim stupidity here. You cannot claim ignorance. You know that this is not an equal standard, which means that we can only attribute this to malice. It is intentional malice. It is willing malice. It is evil in its absolute purest form. You would literally harm an entire community, an entire country, for reasons that I honestly don't care about. The reasons don't actually matter. All that matters are the actions being taken. They are harmful, and you're continuing with them. This is still, of course, a developing story, and there's actually another one somewhere else in Europe. I'm not sure where it was. It was another stabbing incident that had much the same result. I didn't feel the need to cover both of them because they're similar enough that talking about one is good for both. So these are examples of what overt evil looks like in the real world right now. You can see it in front of you, and now you can understand it. You know what it looks like. You understand why it is. So what do we do about it? That is the harder part, because there are no easy answers on this one. When we go back here and we look at the college thing, as we discussed at length earlier in the comments, there's no simple solution to this one. This is a problem with the entire education system. It is a problem that is so entrenched at this point that there may not be a solution outside of burn it down and rebuild it from scratch. And by the way, forgiving debt would probably be part of that. Because if we were going to say, we're going to just like redo the entire curriculum, we are going to maybe shut down schools, I don't know. Either way, we can all agree that the education system as it stands right now does not work. Sure, it's better in some places than other, but I do believe that the worst example I can possibly give would be Baltimore, Maryland. I don't have it pulled up, but in Baltimore, Maryland, they went through and they did their annual standardized testing. Whatever that might be called. Every state does their own standardized testing. They have to meet federal requirements. And in Baltimore, Maryland, they had a 0% pass. I believe it was in mathematics in Baltimore. They had a 0% pass rate. Absolutely no student in the entire city has a functioning grasp on mathematics. And the rest of the subjects were not any better. There was a single-digit passing in English. Science and things like that, I believe, were just as bad. Maybe a little bit better because science is fun. And so maybe some people got more into that. But either way, almost 0% across the board for everything. How do you fix it? Besides just tear it down and start over? I don't know. But either way, the problem goes far beyond this whole college debt thing. It goes back to the colleges themselves. It goes back to the education system at the state level, at the city level. It goes back to the standards that are being put in place. There's a lot to be done there. There's no easy solution to this one. When it comes to the issues in Chicago, this one is actually a little bit easier. However, it's going to require conviction. That is to say, the problems with the migrant populations in Chicago are going to require people to be cruel. Maybe cruel is the wrong word. But they're going to have to be unkind about it. Because the only proper solution in Chicago is going to be to simply follow the laws. See, the laws are already on the book. Anybody who is not here legally has to be deported. That means that you're going to have to take men, women, and children and put them on a bus and send them back to the border. Or put them on a plane and send them back to whatever country they came from. It is going to mean that a lot of people are going to have to spend a lot of resources to get here, only to have all of that hope and promise taken away from them. And you're going to have to be the one to do it. It is going to be literally taking the candy away from the child. Because the candy in this case is the US, and it's not theirs. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be mean about it. You don't have to get out billy clubs and herd people onto trains. But it does mean that you have to be willing to actually go through and enforce the laws that are already in place. That means that you're going to have to go through and actually elect people, hopefully, who are willing to enforce the laws. Because, for example, the mayor that they currently have in Chicago is not just not going to enforce the laws, he's actually anti-law. Literally, he was actually voted into a position on the bill of being loose on or lax on crime, further defunding the police. So they're going to need to change their leadership. They're going to need to change their representation. They're going to need to stand up as a whole and say, we want laws enforced, and we want it now. It's doable, but it's going to be hard, and it's going to require the community to come together as a whole to act as a community and enforce what the community wants. And it may happen. We have seen with the people showing up at the town halls, by seeing them show up at the mayoral house, people are getting fed up with it. And they may actually have the conviction now to do it. It's not going to be a quick solution, but it is one that could be done. In the case of this one's actually really easy. And it's one that we've actually talked about at large across the country, and that is simply intolerance. See, the funny thing is that this writer for Deadspin, this online rag, thought that he was going to be fighting intolerance by going after a child for going to a football game and for dressing up at a football game, of all things. The solution here is very simple, actually. We simply don't welcome these people into our communities. Now, what's very possible to happen here is that the family can absolutely sue Deadspin, as well as any other art or outlet that propagated this piece. We saw this in the Nicholas Sandman trials, where you had the class trip that went to DC, and you had the confrontation between the Native American man that was there and one of the students that was on the class trip. And he sued and won pretty much every single major media outlet for undisclosed but presumably very large numbers of money. Now, when it comes to a group like CNN, they have deep pockets. When it comes to many of these online rags, they don't. And so when somebody says literally sue them into oblivion, this is what we could be looking at. Because we have precedent now that we can go off of. And once we do that, we simply make these people unemployable. Very similar to what they want to do, branding this child as a racist and ruining him for life. Once we shut down these online rags, we simply make these people unemployable anymore. We say, okay, what's your name? And we Google your name. Oh, you were part of that online outlet that tried to ruin a child's life. I'm afraid we don't have a place for you in our company. And you exile these people to the outskirts of society. I'm not saying that you have to chase them out of society. Obviously not. Because it may as well be a death sentence, and that's basically what cancel culture is. I've discussed that at length. But you do have to make them aware every single time that they go outside, that they are disapproved of, that people hate them for what they tried to do. And then maybe, after they have lived this life for a while, maybe after they have had their humble pie, they've eaten their crow several times over, maybe then you can forgive them and bring them back into the fold, if they realize the error of their ways. And if they don't, then never let them back into polite society again. That doesn't say you have to prevent them from going to the store, but it does mean that when they do go to the store, you just don't talk to them. You don't look at them. You don't offer them. You don't invite them anywhere. You treat them like the pariah that they are. And that's what we should see for every single news article or every news outlet that posted this. Then we get to this one. What do we do about this? This one is, much like the education one, a bit harder. Because we have a big problem here. Similar to Chicago, we need to change policy and actually enforce policy. But the problem here goes far, far deeper. See, if it came down to just this, where you had people who said, you know what, we want Ireland to be for the Irish, that's actually rather easy to solve. Because all you have to do is you probably already have the laws on the books. All you have to do is enforce them. Okay? People who need or who want to stay, people who want to claim safe refuge, put them through the proper process. Validate their claims. If they have a legitimate sanctuary claim, you can allow them to stay. If they don't have a legitimate sanctuary claim, unfortunately, they have to go. Yes, that means that you're going to be making or giving several people a bad life. Unfortunately, though, you can't save everybody. And that's where charity comes in. From a legal perspective, you only take in the ones who have a legal right to be there. Everything else comes down to charity, and there are charity groups that do that already. Let the charity groups do their job, and you do yours. The job of the government is to protect the citizenry. Not provide for, not pander to, but to protect. And right now, they are failing at that job. And all they have to do to fix it is to just do the job. However, before we can get to that, we need to deal with these people. The ones who labeled this as thuggish and manipulative. The ones who said that this was a lunatic faction driven by far-right ideology. The ones who said Irish Lives Matter is an anti-immigrant hate incident. This has to be taken care of before you can even begin to work on enforcing laws, because these people will not do the job. They won't. Until these people are out of their positions and somebody who will do the job is in them, nothing is going to change. And so how do we do this? Well, the best outcome would be to simply vote them out. To put in people who have more of a populist bent. And I know populist right now is a hot button word, because populist has been reduced to some kind of racist term or a fascist term or anything like that. But populist literally just means what the population wants. And that's what we need. We need to have more people who are populists getting in. Once we've done that, then we can work on actually enforcing laws and taking care of the native community there. Until that happens, though, I mean, nothing is going to change. And what do we do with these people once they are out of office? Well, much as we said in the case of Deadspin going after a child, once these people have been removed from office, they should be excised to the edges of society. Not expelled, not exiled. I'm not talking about simply removing them, but they should not be allowed in private company. They should be forced to bear the weight of what they have done to their own communities. I mean, if they do not believe that Irish lives matter, then the Irish people should not welcome them. And if they choose to leave because of that, because they don't feel welcome, then that's on them. But they should not be welcomed after doing something like this. And the only reason they feel that they can do this is because they are protected. These people are protected by buildings. They're protected by soldiers and security officers. They're protected by police officers. They are protected from any of the consequences of their own actions. Once they don't have that protection, well, let them live that life. I'm not saying go after them. I'm just saying let them get a taste of what they were imposing on everybody else. And that's about the only solution there is there, unfortunately. And if the voting doesn't work out, then unfortunately we may look at an Ireland that isn't Irish anymore. But that'll be a reflection of what the people will tolerate. I mean, that is the idea of democracy. We get what we tolerate. So we'll have to wait and see. That's about the best I can offer on this subject, because these are complicated topics and none of these solutions are easy. But the first thing we have to do is identify who is responsible. We have to understand that what they're doing is not just on accident. It's intentional, it's malicious, and that has to be the highest priority over everything else. Yes, we have other problems in society. We have lots of problems in society. There's still bad water pipes in Flint. But until we can deal with the people who are actually in charge of all of this, nothing else can get done. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap it up here. Didn't actually expect this to go on for 2 hours, but there we go. All I can hope on is I got my point across clearly, because I didn't get a whole lot of time to do research on this one. I usually try to have notes written up on this, but not this time. This time, completely making it up as I go along. That went fine. I hope I gave you something to think about at least. I know you gave me stuff to think about, like the whole thing about, you know, the 6 years out for colleges and seeing if your degree was actually worth it. I like that idea. I had never considered it before. Listening to Tim Pool, he had mentioned that his idea for reform for colleges was to simply eliminate interest on college debt. And I'm like, absolutely, all on board for that one. You pay back what you borrowed. Absolutely good. The idea of coming back on the colleges for useless degrees, I think that's awesome. I'd love to see it. And again, this comes down to a case of, I get how that's going to suck for some of the teachers who get fired from their jobs. There is one other thing to consider in that one, is that already kind of happens. And I'm sure that's not a surprise. We all know that if there's a class that just doesn't get enough students, well, the class just doesn't happen. And if you were only teaching that one class, now you're out of a job. So it's not new. We would just be seeing more of it. But I still think it's interesting stuff to think about. It's interesting stuff to think about. And I intend to think about it more later. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to wrap it up here. JP says it was a good talk. I think it was a good talk too. I'm glad that I did it. Next week, there will not be a lecture. I will be working at a food pantry, and so I will not be home. So can't do it then. Tomorrow is the tabletop stream. That is back. And so we will be doing more stuff like that. That's fun. Is there anything else? Any other news? Not yet. I'm sitting at 496 subscribers, so if I can get 4 more people to subscribe, that'll pretty much make my entire year. So if you're in here and you haven't subscribed already, please do so. And if you do subscribe, make sure you hit that little bell. That way you get notified every time these videos come out. If you know somebody else who's also kind of into the whole politics thing, especially if you've heard them complaining about how things are going right now and the responsibility of their leaders, share this lecture with them. It might give them some insights into it. And maybe they can decide what actions they want to take afterwards. Otherwise, though, if you just like me, leave a like on the stream, leave comments down below after the stream is over, or join us on the Discord, where you can yell at me in the lecture channel about all the stuff that I got wrong today. That's what it's there for. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Otherwise, though, I look forward to seeing you the next time I can, either tomorrow for the tabletop stream or in a couple of weeks for the next lecture, whatever that happens to be. So, take care of yourself, take care of your family, just take care in general, and I'll see you then.